Welcome everyone, we are from Education Lift, and in this video we're going to start our introduction to exponents. What is an exponent? To answer this question, let's first review repeated operations. And for most people, the first operation they see repeated is addition. So let's review repeated addition. So for example, let's say we're adding three 2's together. We could write this down as 2 plus 2 plus 2. And notice we're adding the same number repeatedly. And this is why we call this repeated addition. Now adding three 2's is very short to write down. However, as we add more 2's together, it becomes long very quickly. So as another example, let's say we're adding 6 2's. So we could write this as 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And already adding 6 2's is a lot longer to write down than adding 3 2's. So we wanted a way to shorten how we write repeated addition. And I don't know about you, but I like to write things shorter if possible. And the way we do that is multiplication. So for whole numbers, multiplication is repeated addition. So let's convert the repeated addition examples from earlier as multiplication problems. Let's start with our example of adding three 2's together. Three 2's. We first write down the amount of 2's we're adding together, which is 3. And then we write the multiplication sign to show that we're going to multiply. And then we're going to write down the number we're adding repeatedly, which is 2. So adding three 2's can be rewritten as 3 times 2. So then we could also do the same thing for adding 6 2's. Let me write that down here. 6 2's. And so we first write down the amount of 2's we're adding together, which is 6, then the multiplication sign, and then the number we're adding repeatedly, which is 2. So adding 6 2's could be rewritten as 6 times 2. So we have successfully converted our repeated addition examples as multiplication problems, and we see that this is much shorter than writing our repeated addition. Let's talk about how we're going to write the multiplication operator. So a lot of us began using the multiplication sign when we first learned multiplication. However, as we do more operations with variables, particularly multiplication, the multiplication sign can be confused with the most common variable, which is x. So we want to rewrite this operator so it's clear in many situations. So as an example, let's go down to our 3 times 2 and 6 times 2. A lot of people use a dot instead of the multiplication sign. So what we do here is for 3 times 2, we keep the 3 and the 2 the same, but instead of the multiplication sign, we'll replace it with the dot. And the same thing goes with 6 times 2. Keep the 6 and the 2 the same, and then we replace the multiplication sign with a dot. So this is clear if we had variables. However, if we mix whole numbers with decimals, something like 3 times 2.5, if we used a dot, this operator could be confused with the decimal point. Some people might think, hey, this is 3.2 times 5, which it's not. So to avoid this confusion even with numbers, we are going to use the asterisk. The asterisk is commonly seen in computers, so a lot of computer programming languages and the keyboards have the asterisk. And then another common place is the calculator. A lot of calculators still use the asterisk to display multiplication. So we could do the same process with 3 times 2 and 6 times 2. For 3 times 2, we keep the 3 and the 2 the same, just like we did with the dot, and then we put the asterisk in the middle. And the same thing with 6 times 2. Keep the 6 and the 2 and put the asterisk in the middle. And so even with decimals, we have something like 3 times 2.5. When we use the asterisks cannot be confused with the decimal point. And so this is clearer than when we use the dot. So for now on, we're going to use the asterisk instead. So far, we have reviewed repeated operations by reviewing repeated addition. And then we saw how we could rewrite repeated addition as multiplication. We also rewrote the multiplication operator with the asterisk. But now the question is, are there other operations we can repeat with the same number? Another common operation to repeat is multiplication. So now let's talk about repeated multiplication. So instead of adding 3 2's, let's multiply 3 2's together. So we can write this down as 2 times 2 times 2. And let me color code these multiplication operators. So here we go. And since we're multiplying 3 2's over and over again, this is why we call this repeated multiplication, because we're multiplying the same number over and over again. Or another way we could say is we're multiplying the same number repeatedly. And just like repeated addition, multiplying 3 2's is very short to write down. However, as we increase the amount that we multiply the same number together, it becomes long very quickly. So let's say we're multiplying 5 3's together. So we could write this as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. And now multiplying 5 3's is becoming much longer than multiplying 3 2's. And this becomes more problematic when we want to combine these kind of products with addition and subtraction. So for example, let's take the 5 3's we multiplied together. So I'll copy that and let's paste. Let's shrink it a bit. And now let's take the 3 2's we multiplied earlier. So copy and then we paste. And let's say at the end we want to add the results. So something like this. Not only is this very long to write down, it can even be confusing to read. So if you look in the middle, it's hard to tell whether we add this 3 and 2 together or whether we keep them in their original products, calculate the value of these products, and then add them at the end. So just like repeated addition, we want to shorten the way we write repeated multiplication. And the question is, how can we write repeated multiplication in a shorter way? To shorten the way we write repeated multiplication, let's look at the example where we're multiplying 3 2's together. So we need 2 pieces of information. The first piece is the number we're multiplying repeatedly, which is 2. And the second piece is the amount we see 2 appear as a factor, which is 3. So this is very similar information as to how we rewrote repeated addition as multiplication. However, we're not going to use multiplication to rewrite 2 times 2 times 2 because multiplication is repeated addition. So for example, let's say we want to rewrite 2 times 2 times 2 as 3 times 2. 3 times 2 tells us that we're going to add 3 2's. And adding 3 2's is different than multiplying 3 2's. And let's say we switch the order. We did 2 times 3. Well, 2 times 3 tells us that we're going to add 2 3's together. And now we're not even using the number we're multiplying repeatedly. So we don't want to use multiplication. Instead, we're going to first write down the number we're multiplying repeatedly, which is 2. And I'm going to write a little bit bigger just to emphasize that. And then we're going to write down the amount we see 2 appear as a factor, which is 3. And we're going to place this 3 in the upper right hand corner of the 2. So I'm going to place the 3 there. So this 3 is what we call the exponent. Exponents tell us we have repeated multiplication. And another name for exponent is the power. So there you have it. We have successfully shortened the way we write repeated multiplication using exponents. Now let's look at the vocabulary of exponents, and we're going to use the example where we're multiplying 3 2's together. So let's begin. The base is the number we are multiplying repeatedly, and since we're multiplying 2 repeatedly in our example, our base is 2. So I'm going to label the 2 as our base. And since we're multiplying 2 repeatedly, we often like to call the base a repeated factor. So in our example, 2 is our repeated factor. And let me write that down. Repeated factor. Now the exponent, or power, tells us the total amount that the base appears as a factor. And since we have 3 factors of 2, that means our exponent, or power, is 3. So the 3 can be labeled as our exponent or power. So let me write that down. So 3 is our exponent or power. And now this entire expression with an exponent is often called an exponential expression. So this expression with 2 and the exponent 3 is our exponential expression. So there we have it. We have the vocabulary of exponential expressions. Now let's go over the different ways to say and write these exponential expressions using words. The first way that people say is we say 2 to the third power. And let's go over how we're saying this. So let's write this down. We first say what our base is, which is 2. And then the third power references the exponent or power of our exponential expression, which is 3. So first we say what our base is, and then we say what our exponent or power is. So the second way is just a shorter version of our first way, and we also say 2 to the third. So it's the same idea. The base is first, and then the exponent. The third way is, since the exponent is in the upper right hand corner of our base, sometimes we say that 2 is being raised to the third power. Either one of these 3 ways are fine. However, we are going to say this first way the most often because it's shorter to say and write down. Alright, so these are the different ways to say and write these exponential expressions using words. In this video, we introduced the idea of exponents as rewriting repeated multiplication. In our next video, we're going to take more repeated multiplication examples and rewrite them with exponents. So I'll see you later in the next video.